Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Kicking Off Around the World, 55 Stories from When Football Met Politics, by Ramon Usall, translated by Luke Stobart, narrated by Andre Bellido. Preface to the English Language Edition, Ramon Usall. The book you are listening to is the reviewed, expanded, and updated version of a work that was published in Catalan in 2017 and in Spanish in 2021. In Iberia, it quickly became a yardstick for historical writing on the footballing world, analyzed from a social and political perspective. The original edition of Kicking Off Around the World was called Futbolítica, an invented word created from blending the Catalan words for football, futbol, and politics, política, to represent the close relationship between the two phenomena, which I explore through the rest of this book. I was inspired to write this book to prove that football is a sport with clear political implications and interpretations, despite some people insisting on denying this. To some extent, the work could be seen as inspired by the tradition arguing that in the 20th century, soccer developed to become a total social fact, as sociologist Norbert Elias and journalist Ignacio Ramonet described it, and which as such has often been a mirror reflecting the human condition. The story is told by bringing together 55 histories of clubs from around the world, ranging from Britain, the cradle of the sport, to the Americas, the Middle East, and Africa. Kicking Off Around the World is written against the commonly voiced view that politics should be kept out of football. Indeed, this book has been written with mistrust towards those who voice this kind of idea. What such people tend to mean by this is that football should not mix with political stances that question the status quo and existing power relations. The idea guiding this book is that football is always a political phenomenon, whether we like it or not. The main question is what politics are at work. The politics in football are shown by championships being organized in accordance with state borders, the World Cup making the states compete for sporting dominance, and clubs often being flagships for groups in society with religious, cultural, language, or national particularities, amongst many other things. The presence of politics in football has been made very clear by recent world events. A major example is the rise of the women's game, which has not stopped growing in public visibility and acclaim since 2017. This was shown in the media attention given to the recent Women's Champions League and World Cup tournaments, which saw women's growing empowerment and fight for full equality played out. Particularly important in this regard were the events that took place around the Spanish team's victory in the Women's World Cup in the summer of 2023. This saw a clash between the players and the Spanish footballing authorities, sparked by the women footballers being treated in a way that fell far short of respecting the equal treatment that is preached by our societies. The sexism prevalent in both the world of soccer as well as in society as a whole was clearly on display in the non-consensual kiss that the president of the Spanish Football Federation, Luis Rubiales, gave to one of Spain's star players, Jennifer Hermoso. This unleashed what became a true feminist social revolt that ended Rubiales' presidency, and which forced the federation to commit to measures aimed at achieving real equality between the women's and men's national teams. Politics in football could also be seen at the men's 2022 World Cup in Qatar, a country with an absolute monarchy that systematically violates human rights and condemns women to subordination. The competition was a telling example of sports washing, using sport as a device to clean up one's global image, and this will be repeated in Saudi Arabia in 2034, showing once again that FIFA is much more concerned about making money and promoting business than guaranteeing respect for civil rights. The outbreak of war in both Ukraine and Gaza has also shown how the game reflects the politics of our times. In this very book, you will be able to discover the story of how, in the dying years of the Soviet Union, Dynamo Kiev became a true Ukrainian national team, even wearing its country's colors. And you can find out how Shakhtar Donetsk, a club currently exiled far from its Donbass birthplace, has become a perfect metaphor for the war that has devastated the Donetsk and Lugansk regions at the heart of the current Russia-Ukraine conflict. Regarding the Palestinian case, you will be able to learn how a club created in a Jordanian refugee camp, Al-Wahadato, effectively became Palestine's national team before FIFA recognized the Palestinian national squad, as happened in 1998. Besides these stories, The fact that football is testimony to the conflicts of our age can be confirmed by developments such as the Israeli national team competing in Europe, despite being geographically situated on a different continent. This was clearly for geopolitical reasons, and rooted in the Israeli Federation's expulsion in 1974 from the Asian Confederation of Football that the Israeli Federation had helped set up. With this book, I hereby invite those from the English-speaking world to discover more than 50 stories that reveal that football and politics indeed go hand in hand a lot more frequently than we might think. Introduction. From the birth of modern football in industrial England in the second half of the 19th century, clubs in which football was played became more than just sports outfits. The collective nature of playing the sport helped strengthen clubs' community identity, leading them to take on the role of representing a town or city, neighborhood, educational institution, parish, or even a specific political ideology. Over the years, playing and watching football has become a truly global phenomenon, helping reaffirm the representational side of many clubs and seeing them frequently acting as mouthpieces for their communities. This is well known in Iberia. For decades, we've been hearing that Barcelona, one of the biggest sporting entities in this part of the world, is more than just a club. It is demonstrated by its intense history, one closely linked to Catalonia's. This has often made the Barcelona team a major political player expressing the aspirations of the Catalan community, from the club supporting Catalonia's first taste of modern self-government, the Mancomunitat of Catalan Provincial Representatives, 1913 to 1925, to Barca's iconic appeal for opponents to the Franco dictatorship, 1939 to 1975, and its fans whistling over the Spanish national anthem to protest the Primo de Rivera dictatorship, 1925 to 1930. Indeed, some pinpoint the start of the transition to democracy in Spain to February 17, 1974, while Franco was dying but still alive, when Barca stormed Real Madrid's Bernabeu Stadium, beating the home side by a historic 0-5, as signifying a reversal of fortunes in Spanish football. Such a claim is a simplification, but Barca has clearly played a historic role at certain points in recent Spanish history. In a different way, this is also true of Real Madrid, whose history is a faithful reflection of Spain over the last century. Examples include when, under the Second Republic, 1931 to 1939, the club stopped being Real, meaning royal or royalist, and how as European champions under the Franco regime, the club projected to the world a positive image of Spain, and greatly aided the dictatorship in ending its international isolation. Practically all the regions of the planet in which there are national conflicts have their Barca or Madrid. In fact, in almost every stateless nation, some entities have adopted the role of representing their community in sport. This is the case of the Basque country's Athletic Bilbao, with its unique policy of only signing footballers born in the Basque territories to reaffirm its Basque identity. Corsica's SC Bastia, whose greatest successes coincided with the rise of its nationalist movement. The two Celtics, both Glasgow and Belfast, representing the Irish Republican community. Al-Wahadato, created in Jordan's refugee camps, which became Palestine's footballing voice. Dinamo Zagreb and Hajduk Split in federal Yugoslavia's Croatia. And Arafat Yerevan in Soviet Armenia. The list is long. The clubs, which in varied places and historical contexts have ended up embodying the aspirations of the national communities to which they belong, are truly legion. But football clubs that are political players are not limited to those who are a banner for nationalist ambitions. As an example, we have FC Sochaux, the first professional club in France. This was created under the auspices of the district's main factory, run by the Peugeot car company, which sought to encourage its workers to identify with its public image. Sochaux's team wore the corporate logo and colors. Yet just as clubs have been set up to diffuse class tensions, others have made social alliances a cornerstone of their identity. More specifically, many clubs in history have been associated with the working class. Racing Club de Lens in the mining region of northern France. Rayo in Madrid's working-class Vallecas neighborhood. Sloboda from industrial Tuzla in Tito's Yugoslavia. Torino, which captured blue-collar workers' desire to beat a Juventus aligned with the Fiat employers. Or, closer to my home, the modest Atlético Baleares, formed in early 20th century Mallorca as a club identifying with the island's working people. A football club's symbolism is often so pronounced that looking at its history allows us to revisit most of the events that have shaped the contemporary era. No dictator worth their salt has failed to use a club for propaganda purposes. As Franco did with Real Madrid, the Portuguese dictator Salazar tried to overcome his international isolation through the European performances of Lisbon's Benfica. With Eusebio in its squad, the club became the chief representative of the Portuguese imperialist notions, championed by the local autocrat. The same approach had previously been taken by Benito Mussolini, the Italian fascist leader. He understood that the sport could be a vehicle for spreading his ideology by instrumentalizing the successes of the national Squadra Azzurra, blue team, to justify his idea of a triumphant Italy. Later, other dictators did the same. These included Romania's Nicolae Ceausescu, who placed his son Valentin at the helm of Steaua Bucuresti, which became the first club from Eastern Europe to lift the coveted European Cup. Ceausescu also gave crucial aid to the forming of a top-flight team from his home village of Scornicești. Likewise, Augusto Pinochet in Chile took advantage not just of Colo-Colo, the country's biggest club, but also of several teams created under his rule in militant mining settlements. These aimed to avoid social conflict by applying the classic tactic of giving people bread and circuses, one as ancient as Rome itself. The other side to the attempts to place football at the service of the powers that be is that throughout its history, the beautiful game has also been used to question dictatorial rule. For example, the right-wing Portuguese Estado Novo regime faced some of its strongest opposition in a football ground. Académica de Coimbra, a club set up by the University Students' Association in the central Portuguese city of Coimbra, staged a vibrant protest during the 1969 Portuguese Cup final. Also, some of the football clubs that became the playthings of tyrants had a rebellious past, which refused to be erased from popular memory. For instance, the Colo-Colo lionized by Pinochet had previously enjoyed one of its moments of greatest glory under Salvador Allende's left-wing Popular Unity government. When the club ended runner-up in the Copa Libertadores, Liberators' Cup, the South American club competition whose very name recalls the continent's liberation from European colonial subjugation. The same Colo-Colo that the dictator would later instrumentalize proudly posed at the La Moneda Palace next to a smiling President Allende, who saw the squad as excellent ambassadors for the Chile of that time. Real Madrid has tended to be identified with the dictatorship and conservative Spanish nationalism, and its most renowned historical figure, Santiago Bernabeu, was a known Franco supporter. Yet the club has a Republican past, which those running the club today seem little interested in reclaiming. This is the Madrid of the Second Republic, which scrapped the royalist name given to it by King Alfonso XIII. It even had a president, Antonio Ortega, who was executed at the end of the Spanish Civil War for being a Republican Army colonel and Communist Party member. As can be seen, there is no event in contemporary history that it would be impossible to explain through the trajectory of a football club. Nazism's vile obsession with persecuting Jews destroyed Hakoah Wien, one of the many openly Jewish clubs in Europe in the first third of the 20th century. The deadly Balkan conflicts at the end of that century had, as a prelude, a match that pitted together the two teams representing Croat or Serbian nationalism, which would later collide in an all-out war. This was the game played on May 13, 1990, between Dinamo Zagreb and Red Star Belgrade, which ended in a pitched battle. It signaled the start of the gradual breakup of Yugoslavia, an ethnically diverse country which under President Tito's rule had dreamed of fellowship between nationalities, as was perfectly embodied in the Velej Mostar team, until the subsequent and tragic Bosnian War shattered that dream of unity and fraternity. Another football match, not on this occasion between clubs but national squads, was even the spark for a lightning war between Honduras and El Salvador in 1969. Tensions between both countries developed around a qualifying playoff for the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. After both teams had won at home, the decider, held on neutral ground, fueled enough animosity between the two states that it triggered the Soccer War, as dubbed by Polish journalist Ryszard Kapuscinski. The politics of colonialism have also been played out through football. Colonial powers forced the inhabitants of annexed territories to play the European game, only for the occupied peoples to use the sport as a device to challenge colonial power. History is full of anecdotes on colonial clubs, such as Atlético de Tetuán. the top club in the Spanish Protectorate of Morocco, which became the first African team to play in the top tier of a European league, or Racing Universitaire d'Alger, one of the colonial clubs in French Algeria, which was the first team in the world to be able to boast having a future Nobel Prize winner in goal. These clubs that served the needs of colonizers were very soon being challenged by teams formed out of the native population. Among many such cases was Espérance de Tunis, which would represent Muslim Tunisians' struggle for liberation from occupation. We can therefore tell that there are a multitude of historic episodes that can be interpreted through football clubs. The partition of Germany after the Second World War, the building and later fall of the Berlin Wall, and the strategic importance of this city during the Cold War are good further examples. Albert Camus, the goalkeeper for Colonial Algiers' university team, once claimed that he owed everything he had learned about morals, life, and people's obligations to football. Loosely paraphrasing him, we can say that our recent world history, which is the ultimate word on humanity's morals, can be understood by examining the role of football and its clubs over the last 150 years. Welcome, then, to this modest lesson in late modern history through the stories of 55 politically extraordinary clubs, a short world tour of these unusual political agents that have often had historic impacts, and ones that are often much bigger than they might at first seem. 1. Britain and Ireland. Manchester City FC. The humanitarian origins of the petrodollar club. The year 2008 marked a turning point in Manchester City's history. That year, the club's precarious financial situation meant its ownership was transferred away from Thaksin Shinawatra, former Thai prime minister and businessman accused of corruption. Taking up the helm was now the Abu Dhabi United Group, a United Arab Emirates (UAE) company, headed by Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, minister and member of the UAE royal family. This greatly enlarged City's spending power, making it one of the archetypal football business clubs. Its team had until then been in the shadow, particularly regarding international limelight, of its local rival Manchester United. Yet now, City's bottomless funding capacity triggered growing hatred towards the outfit, chaired by Khaldoon Al-Mubarak, the man the Abu Dhabi firm placed to run the club. Although there were already several British clubs which had been bought by unconventional foreign billionaires, City became the main target for opponents of a modern football characterized by a loss of community identity of clubs seemingly awash with money. Reproaches against City's owner company being linked to UAE's governing monarchy were joined by the common criticism that the petrodollar club lacks a past. Nothing could be further from the truth. Manchester City is a club brimming with history, even if it is now in the hands of those who may be unaware of it. Although City was officially founded in 1894, its life spans back to 1880. Then, several members of the Anglican St. Mark's Church in Gorton, in the city's east, decided to set up a team out of solidarity. Football, then, was far from being the popular sport it is today in Manchester. The people of UK's industrial capital preferred rugby and cricket, and only had one organized football club. These were the circumstances in which the parish clergy, who had helped create a cricket team in 1875, set up the St. Mark's, West Gorton football team, so it would allow for sport in the winter months as well. The club's aims were very clear: to avoid young people's increasing estrangement from the church, and to give them the opportunity to do physical activity to stay clear of alcoholism and growing gang violence. These were chronic problems in an East Manchester that was hard hit by unemployment, precariousness, and poverty. This was even more the case, as the area, which previously had been an idyllic pastoral one, had developed within decades into a focal point for the steelmaking and railway manufacturing industries. Despite St. Mark's being a Church of England club that aimed to halt the growing divorce between youth and church, its humanitarian nature meant that its ranks were open to all players, regardless of religious beliefs. The team's debut game, now part of City's ancient history, was held on November 13th, 1880. This was against another religious team from Macclesfield, exemplifying the fact that a significant number of clubs from that era originated from the church's attempt to direct young people towards its beliefs. Despite the West Gorton Club's noble goal of putting an end to the violence plaguing Manchester's working-class districts, it not only failed to stop this scourge, but its pitch was the setting for several violent incidents. The changes that football was undergoing at that time meant that soon after being created, St. Mark's changed its name a few times. After a short-lived merger with Bellevue, a team for which St. Mark's captain also played at that time, the club became Gorton Association FC, a name seeking to affirm that the club belonged to the working-class Gorton neighborhood. When it moved stadiums in 1887 to one located in the Ardwick suburb, another Manchester industrial district in that era, the club chose to call itself Ardwick Association FC. The links clubs had with working-class communities in that era were clear from many matches such as the one in 1889, in which City's predecessor took on Newton Heath, Manchester United's forerunner. This match was played to raise money for the families of 23 workers who had died in an explosion at the Hyde Road Colliery, next to the club's Ardwick home. The club had several notable successes, such as its victory over Newton Heath in the 1891 Manchester Cup, and its involvement in setting up the league's second division the following year. Yet Ardwick's financial difficulties led it to decide to reorganize itself in 1894, becoming the Manchester City we know today. The new city became the most popular club in Manchester, so much so that until the last decade it held the record attendance for an English League game, apart from matches played at Wembley. In a March 1934 Cup tie, its main road stadium hosted no fewer than 84,569 spectators. Before the Sheikhs arrived, the Sky Blues could boast of having won 2 league titles, 4 national cups, and a European Cup winners' trophy. Their popularity led them to claim to be the Manchester team with most supporters from within the city, ahead of United, which had a legion of supporters from elsewhere in Britain. Hence, the rivalry between the two sides has often led the citizens to see the Red Devils as unrelated to Manchester. For that reason, when City signed the Argentinian striker Carlos Tevez from United, he was welcomed with a provocative "Welcome to Manchester" poster campaign. So despite the club being bought up by the Sheikhs prompting greater dislike of the Sky Blues and a negation of its history, the truth is that the petrodollar city of today is the grandchild of the Anglican parish club that was created out of solidarity and charity. Just one of many contradictions highlighting the nature of the present football business model. A world where practically everything can be bought, apart from history, that is. Tottenham Hotspur FC. Spurs' Jewish imprint. The image English football has had of Tottenham Hotspur, popularly known as Spurs, is that it is a Jewish team. Little does it matter that the most generous estimations are that only 5% of the club's fans are of this religion. A bigger factor has been that the stands at White Hart Lane, Tottenham's old stadium that was demolished in 2017, were abundant with the Star of David, including Israeli flags, and that the side's supporters are known as the Yid Army. Tottenham's Jewish support is much reduced today, despite the last 3 people chairing the club since 1982 all having been of Jewish extraction. Yet historically speaking, the Jewish community has formed a large part of the club's membership, especially in the early 20th century. The Jewish community in London grew considerably at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, because of the many Jews fleeing from persecution in Eastern Europe, and particularly Russia. Many of the new Jewish Londoners settled in the Tottenham neighborhood, in the city's north, in an area undergoing industrial expansion that required the labor this immigration could provide. One of the key things which enabled integration of these mainly working-class Jewish immigrants was the local football club Tottenham Hotspur. This had been established in 1882 and already aroused passions among the district's inhabitants. Many of the Jews arriving from Eastern Europe became regulars at White Hart Lane, a reality that was reinforced by a second generation of Jewish supporters born in the neighborhood and who fully identified with the club. This was important in terms of forging Spurs' identity. Thanks to this second generation, and particularly after the First World War, the number of Jewish fans in the club's stands grew steadily until Tottenham became the most popular team among members of London's Jewish community. By 1935, White Hart Lane would have as many as 10,000 Jewish spectators, corresponding to almost a third of the stadium's total capacity. This was crucial to Spurs gaining a Jewish identity in the English footballing mindset of that period. It was perhaps precisely because of that association that its stadium was chosen by the English Football Association to host a friendly between England and Nazi Germany in December 1935. Because of Hitler's openly anti-Semitic policies, the Jewish community saw the event as an affront. Spurs Jewish fans led an attempt to stop the match from taking place, arguing that it insulted not just the Jewish community, but also all freedom-loving people in Britain. Despite a substantial portion of Tottenham fans opposing the match, White Hart Lane not only hosted the friendly, ending in a 3-0 win for England, but also bore witness to the German team giving the Nazi salute as the swastika flag hung shamefully over the match. However, the controversial National Socialist banner did not fly for long. Just after kickoff, a home fan climbed up to the grandstand roof and managed to pull it down. Fascism had also been flourishing in the United Kingdom, and Spurs Jewish fans became the scapegoat for organizations like Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists. This party accused Tottenham's Jews of being unable to comprehend the decency and fair play that characterized British sportsmanship. A truly cynical exercise, as the words were uttered by the person most responsible for countless violent incidents on the streets of London, episodes that led the fascist party to be banned in 1940. Over the years, Tottenham has consolidated its Jewish identity. This is despite its directors' reluctance to enthusiastically embracing such an affinity. Jews continued to flock to White Hart Lane, although over the decades they have become less and less a mainstay of the club. It was not until well into the 1960s, by which time the Jewish community far from embodied Spurs, as it had done in the 1930s, that rival fans began to attack Tottenham as an all-Jewish club. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, when violence and racism were the order of the day in most British stadiums, Spurs were met at away games with anti-Semitic behavior. These included Nazi salutes, hissing that mimicked that of gas chambers, or chants such as, "Does your rabbi know you're here?" and "Spurs are on their way to Auschwitz. Hitler's gonna gas them again." The response to insults, which were aimed at all Spurs fans, not just its Jewish minority, was for supporters to reaffirm the Jewish identity the club had forged over the decades. As well as Star of David flags becoming commonplace in its stands, its supporters proudly embraced the pejorative term Yid. This is how the Yid Army came about, the name by which Tottenham fans are known. Over time, this self-labeling as Yids has been repeatedly challenged due to the derogatory nature of the term. Indeed, in September 2013, the Football Association and police went as far as banning its use, even among Spurs fans. The considerable controversy this sparked went as far as 10 Downing Street, prompting the then Prime Minister, Conservative David Cameron, to state that there was a substantial difference between Spurs fans self-describing themselves as Yids and someone calling someone a Yid as an insult. Despite such words, several Tottenham fans were arrested and charged for using the controversial language. Although the charges were later dropped, the episode stands in stark contrast to the lack of determined action to prosecute the anti-Semitic slurs that Spurs fans are often subjected to. Ironically, the willingness to prosecute the word Yid only encouraged its use among Tottenham fans after a period in which the term seemed to have fallen into disuse. The episode underlined the Jewish imprint that has shaped the London club's identity. Liverpool FC. The fans that took on the Iron Lady. The first game Liverpool played after Margaret Thatcher died was in Reading 5 days later, on April 13, 2013. At the stadium, Reds fans who had traveled to watch their team had no qualms about loudly celebrating the death of the former Conservative Prime Minister. The passing of the Iron Lady was the subject of numerous chants and banners to remember the brutal clash between the city of Liverpool, and especially the supporters of its top team, and Thatcher, during her time in 10 Downing Street. It was not the first time that season that the Liverpool fans had remembered the XPM. On September 15, 2012, while the club visited the Sunderland Stadium, the Merseyside fans sang the warning that, "When Maggie Thatcher dies, we're all having a party." It was their way of celebrating the conclusions of an independent report published days before on the Hillsborough tragedy in which 96 Reds supporters were killed in April 1989. The report blamed those terrible events on the incompetent actions of the police authorities, whose actions were whitewashed at the time by Thatcher, while Liverpool fans themselves were blamed for the catastrophe. The Hillsborough events formed the peak of a tense relationship between Reds fans and an Iron Lady who had been championing a crusade against working-class football fans. She particularly did so against Liverpool supporters, who had sometimes been at the center of serious incidents. These included those during the 1985 European Cup final at Heysel Stadium in Brussels, which sadly resulted in 39 deaths, for which Liverpool hooligans were the main offenders. The animosity towards the PM by the Reds faithful was not only football-related, but revolved greatly around a political matter. Merseyside's impoverishment because of the Iron Lady's austerity program. Her policies, which started being applied in 1979, led to the rapid decline of a city once hailed as the New York of Europe, with
Sample complete. Ready to continue?